The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles filled my parents' dining room as I sat in my usual spot at the far end of the table, listening to my family discuss my life as if I weren't there. Christmas Eve dinner at the Reynolds household had always been less about celebration and more about performance. Who had the biggest accomplishments to share, who'd made the most money, who'd climbed highest on whatever ladder they'd chosen to climb. "Emma, sweetheart, pass the gravy," my mother said, her voice carrying that particular tone of gentle concern she'd perfected over the years. At 58, Patricia Reynolds still looked like the country club president she'd been for the past decade, her blonde hair styled perfectly, her cream-colored cashmere sweater probably costing more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. I passed the gravy boat to my older brother James, who sat between us with his wife Sophie. James worked as a senior partner at a prestigious law firm downtown, drove a Tesla, and never missed an opportunity to mention either fact. Sophie taught at an elite private academy, and had opinions about everything, especially my life choices. "So Emma," Sophie said, cutting into her turkey with surgical precision, "are you still in that tiny apartment near the pier, the one with the water-damaged ceiling?" "The ceiling got repaired 6 months ago," I said evenly. "But yes, same apartment." My father Richard Reynolds set down his fork with more force than necessary. At 63, he'd built a successful career as an investment banker, and had very specific ideas about what constituted success. "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, Emma. Your mother and I are concerned about your living situation." "Here we go," my younger sister Melissa muttered, though she was smiling. At 29, she'd recently made junior partner at a consulting firm and had moved into a high-rise condo in the financial district. She loved these family dinners because they usually ended with someone else being the target of Dad's concern. "What about my living situation?" I asked, taking a sip of water. Dad leaned back in his chair, assuming his boardroom posture. "You're 31 years old, Emma. You have a degree from a good university. You're clearly intelligent, but you're still renting a one-bedroom apartment in a deteriorating building, working at a job that barely pays above minimum wage." "I don't work for minimum wage, Dad." "Fine, slightly above minimum wage," he continued, waving his hand dismissively. "The point is, you're not building equity. You're not investing in your future. You're just existing." My mother jumped in, her concerned face fully activated. "We just want you to be realistic about your options, honey. The beachfront area is lovely, we all agree, but it's not practical for someone in your position. The rent alone must be eating up most of your income." "Half of it actually," I said quietly. James nodded sagely, as if I'd just confirmed his worst suspicions. "Exactly, that's financially irresponsible. You should be putting that money toward a down payment on a real property, something inland where prices are reasonable." Sophie added, "We saw a lovely condo development out in Riverside. 2 bedrooms, nice amenities, and the HOA fees are very reasonable. That's the kind of place that makes sense for your salary range." "Riverside is an hour from the coast," I pointed out. "So," Melissa shrugged, "you don't actually do anything ocean-related anyway. You just like living near it, which is a luxury you can't afford." Dad picked up his wine glass, swirling the Cabernet with the air of someone about to deliver wisdom. "Emma, this oceanfront lifestyle isn't for people like you. It's for people who've built substantial wealth, who can afford the premium. Doctors, lawyers, executives, successful entrepreneurs, people who've earned the right to live in paradise." The words hung in the air like smoke. "People like you," as if I were fundamentally different from the rest of them, fundamentally lesser. "Your father's right," Mom said, reaching over to pat my hand. "There's no shame in being practical. Moving inland would be the smart choice. You could save money, maybe finally start dating seriously, settle down. You can't build a life on the beach when you're barely making ends meet." "I'm not barely making ends meet," I said. "Well, you're certainly not thriving," Sophie said. "I mean, you work at that little marine conservation nonprofit. It's very noble, very admirable, but it's not a real career path. When are you going to accept that and pivot to something more substantial?" James cut in before I could respond. "The problem is Emma's always been a dreamer. Ever since we were kids, she had her head in the clouds. Remember when she wanted to be a marine biologist? Or when she thought she'd become a documentary filmmaker? She's never been grounded in reality." "I am a marine biologist," I said quietly. "I have a PhD. A PhD you're not using," Dad said firmly. "You could be working in research, making six figures at a university, or a private lab. Instead you're doing what? Organizing beach cleanups, running educational programs for school kids. That's volunteer work, Emma. That's what retired people do for fun, not what a 31-year-old with a doctorate does for a career." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen under the table. The message was from David Thornton, my real estate agent. Well, one of my real estate agents, the primary one. Miss Reynolds portfolio valuation complete. Beachfront properties, $47 million current market value. Laguna acquisition ready to close. 3 competing offers on your Marina del Rey complex. Recommend accepting the $8.2 million bid. Call when free to discuss strategy. I read it twice, keeping my face completely neutral, then set my phone face down on my lap. Are you even listening? Melissa asked, exasperated. Sorry, what? We're trying to help you, Mom said. We've actually been discussing this as a family, and we think the best solution would be for you to move in with your father and me for a while, just until you get on your feet financially. I looked up sharply. Move back home, temporarily, Dad clarified. 6 months, maybe a year. You could save your rent money, build up a nest egg, and then make a sensible purchase in a reasonable area. We could even help with a down payment if you show us you're serious about changing your approach to life. My approach to life, I repeated. Yes, he said firmly. This bohemian beach lifestyle has to end. You're not 22 anymore. It's time to grow up and make adult decisions. James refilled his wine glass. Dad's offering you a lifeline here, Em. Most people would be grateful. Think about it rationally, Sophie added. You're spending what, $1,800 a month on rent? That's over $21,000 a year you're throwing away. Living with your parents for a year, you could save that entire amount, plus your utilities and food costs. You'd have enough for a decent down payment on a starter condo. In Riverside, Melissa added, helpfully. Or maybe even further out. I saw some nice places in Moreno Valley, very affordable. Mom was nodding along. And you'd be closer to family. We could help you meet eligible men. Sophie's colleague has a brother who's recently divorced, very successful, works in medical device sales. I'm not interested in medical device sales, I said. You're missing the point, Dad said, his patience clearly wearing thin. The point is that you're wasting your life and your potential. You have a PhD from Stanford, for God's sake. Do you know how many of my colleagues would kill to have their children achieve that? And you're using it to teach kindergartners about starfish. I do more than that, not much more, from what I can see, he said. Your bank statements. You've been looking at my bank statements. Your mother has access to the account we set up for you in college, he said dismissively. We're still listed as authorized users, and what we see is concerning, Emma, very concerning. Your balance is rarely above $5,000. You're living paycheck to paycheck. That account, the one I'd opened when I was 18, and had kept as a checking account for basic expenses. The one that showed regular deposits from my nonprofit salary, and regular withdrawals for rent, groceries, utilities. The account that represented approximately 2% of my actual financial life. My finances are fine, Dad. They're demonstrably not fine, he said, which is why we're having this conversation. Emma, I'm going to be blunt, because someone needs to be. You're not a kid anymore. You can't keep pretending you're going to somehow make it as a beach bum with a nonprofit job. The numbers don't work, the lifestyle doesn't work, and quite frankly, it's embarrassing. Embarrassing, I echoed. Yes, he said, not backing down. When my colleagues ask about my children, I talk about James's cases, Melissa's consulting projects. What am I supposed to say about you? That you organize beach cleanups, that you're 31 and living in a rundown apartment. It reflects poorly on this family. Mom made a soft sound of protest, but she didn't actually disagree. So here's what's going to happen, Dad continued. After Christmas, you're going to give notice on that apartment. You'll move back here by February 1st. You'll start seriously looking for positions that utilize your education. I have contacts at several research institutions who owe me favors, and you'll get your financial house in order. This isn't a suggestion, Emma. This is an intervention. The table fell silent. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my response. James wore an expression of satisfied righteousness. Sophie looked sympathetic in that performative way people do when they're secretly enjoying someone else's humiliation. Melissa was checking her phone, already bored now that the intervention had been delivered. My phone buzzed again. Another message from David. Also, your Santa Monica property just received unsolicited offer, $12.3 million. All cash, 30-day close. Seller is serious. This is 40% above our listing expectations. Recommend we counter at $13 million. Your thoughts? I set the phone down again and looked at my father. And if I don't want to move back home, Then you're on your own, he said flatly. No more family financial support of any kind. No more birthday checks. No more help with emergencies. You want to prove you can make it on your own, with your little beach lifestyle. Fine, but don't come crying to us when reality hits. Richard, Mom said softly, but she didn't actually argue with him. I'm serious, Patricia, he said. We've enabled this long enough. Emma needs to grow up, and if she won't do it with our help, she'll have to do it the hard way. James raised his wine glass. To tough love. Sophie clinked her glass against his. Sometimes it's the only thing that works. I looked around the table at my family, their satisfied faces, their certainty that they were right, and I was wrong, their complete conviction that they understood my life better than I did. Okay, I said quietly. Dad blinked. Okay, what? Okay, I'll think about it. There's nothing to think about, he said. This is what's happening. Dad, I'm 31. You can't actually force me to move back home, but I appreciate your concern. I'll take it under advisement. His face reddened. Under advisement, Emma, this isn't a negotiation. Actually, it is, I said calmly. You've stated your position. I've acknowledged it, but my living situation is ultimately my decision. Made with what money? He demanded. You can barely afford that dump you're in now. How are you going to manage when we cut you off completely? I took a sip of water, buying myself a moment. This was it, the moment I'd been avoiding for 6 years, the moment when I'd either have to keep playing the role they'd assigned me, or finally tell them the truth. My phone buzzed a third time. David again. Sorry to keep messaging on Christmas Eve, but the Carlsbad development project is ready for your final approval. $23 million total investment, projected 18% annual return. Your legal team signed off, just need your green light. I picked up my phone, and for the first time, didn't hide the screen. I read the message slowly, then looked up at my father. Dad, can I ask you something? What? He said irritably. What do you think I actually do? Day to day, I mean. What do you think my life looks like? He frowned. You work at that nonprofit, the Pacific Marine Conservation Society or whatever it's called. You coordinate their educational programs, organize volunteers. You make approximately $45,000 a year, based on typical nonprofit salaries for that position. And that's it. That's my entire life. Well, you volunteer additional hours, from what I understand, which is part of the problem. You're working for free when you should be building a real career. I nodded slowly. What if I told you that you're right about some of that, but completely wrong about the important parts? James leaned forward. What are you talking about? I do work at Pacific Marine Conservation, I said. I volunteer there 20 hours a week, have been for 6 years. I love it. The education programs, the beach cleanups, the research initiatives, it's genuinely meaningful work. 20 hours a week, Mom said, but that's half time. What do you do the rest of the week? I manage my properties. The silence that followed was profound. Properties, Sophie said finally. What properties? I unlocked my phone and pulled up my primary email account, the one they didn't know existed, the one that handled all my actual business. I handed the phone to my father. Scroll through, I said. Take your time. He stared at the screen, his expression moving from confusion to disbelief. Email after email from property management companies, real estate agents, investment firms, legal teams, messages about rental agreements, property valuations, acquisition opportunities, market analyses. What is this? He asked, his voice strange. That's my real inbox, I said. The one I use for Reynolds Property Holdings LLC. That's my company. I founded it 7 years ago with the inheritance from Grandpa Thomas. Remember? The $200,000 he left me, that everyone said I'd waste. Mom's hand went to her mouth. The money you said you were investing. I did invest it, in a distressed beachfront property in Oceanside. A teardown that everyone said was worthless, because it was in a flood zone and needed too much work. I bought it for $190,000. Spent the remaining 10 on critical repairs, and flipped it 18 months later for $420,000. James was reading over Dad's shoulder now, his face pale. These emails are talking about millions of dollars, because that's what I work with now, I said simply. I took that profit and bought 2 more properties, then 4. Then I started acquiring larger developments. Right now, I own 37 beachfront and near beach properties along the Southern California coast, residential, commercial, mixed use. Most are rentals generating steady monthly income. Some are value-add projects I'm renovating. A few are pure appreciation plays in emerging markets. Melissa grabbed the phone from Dad's hands, scrolling frantically. This email is from last week. It's about a property in Laguna Beach. The asking price is $12 million. 12.4, I corrected. And I'm not paying asking. My team negotiated it down to 11.7. We close in January. Your team? Sophie whispered. I have a property manager, 3 real estate agents specializing in different coastal markets, 2 contractors who handle my renovation projects, a lawyer who deals with zoning and permits, and an accountant who manages the corporate structure, plus various consultants depending on the project. Dad was staring at me like I was a stranger. How much are you worth, Emma? I took my phone back and pulled up the message from David. I handed it to my father, watching his face as he read it. Miss Reynolds, portfolio valuation complete. Beachfront properties, $47 million, current market value. Laguna acquisition ready to close. 3 competing offers on your Marina del Rey complex. Recommend accepting the $8.2 million bid. Call when free to discuss strategy. His wine glass tilted, and for a moment I thought he might actually drop it. He set it down carefully on the table, his hand shaking slightly. $47 million, he read aloud. Mom made a sound that might have been a gasp, or a laugh or something in between. Current market value, I clarified. My actual equity is lower once you subtract the mortgages, but I leverage debt strategically. Total portfolio value including the properties under contract is closer to $60 million. Net worth after all liabilities is approximately $42 million. The silence was absolute. Even the Christmas music playing softly in the background seemed to have stopped. James found his voice first. You're a multimillionaire. Yes, and you live in a 1-bedroom apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment that I own, I said. I bought the entire building 3 years ago. 8 units total. I live in one and rent out the others. The water damages Sophie mentioned, that was from a renovation project I was managing. I upgraded all the units with new plumbing and fixtures, increased the property value by 30%. Melissa was scrolling through her own phone now, clearly searching for something. Oh my God, Reynolds Property Holdings. There are news articles. Mystery investor revitalizing Oceanside waterfront. Young entrepreneur, quietly building coastal real estate empire. Emma, you've been featured in the Business Journal. Twice, I said, though I don't do interviews. I prefer to keep things private. Private, Dad's voice cracked. You've been sitting here for years letting us think you were failing. I've been sitting here for years while you all assumed I was failing, I corrected. There's a difference. I never lied about anything. I just didn't correct your assumptions. But why? Mom asked, genuine pain in her voice. Why would you let us worry about you? You weren't worried, Mom. You were disappointed. And honestly, it was easier this way. When I first started having success, I thought about telling you. But then I realized something. The moment I told this family about my business, it would stop being mine. Dad would want to restructure everything. James would have opinions about my legal exposure. Melissa would want to partner on deals. Everyone would have advice, criticisms, suggestions. I looked around the table. This family measures success in very specific ways. The right job titles, the right neighborhoods, the right social circles. I didn't fit those measurements, so you all wrote me off. And that gave me freedom. Freedom to build something without the pressure of family expectations or the need for anyone's approval. Sophie was still staring at the phone. You're buying a $12 million property in Laguna Beach, an 8-unit boutique hotel actually. Distressed sale from owners who over-leveraged. I'm getting it for about 60% of its actual value. After renovations, it'll be worth around $19 million and generate approximately $700,000 in annual net income. $700,000, James repeated weakly, give or take. The Laguna market is strong and getting stronger. It's a good investment. Dad leaned back in his chair, and I watched emotions chase across his face. Shock, confusion, something that might have been pride, and underneath it all, embarrassment. The apartment we wanted you to move out of, he said slowly. The one we said was a dump, is worth approximately $4.2 million. Yes, the building. I mean, my unit is worth around $500,000 on its own, but I'm not selling. The rental income from the other 7 units covers the mortgage and generates about $12,000 a month in profit. Mom was crying now, though I wasn't sure if they were tears of relief or regret. Emma, I don't understand. If you had this kind of success, Why didn't you tell us? We're your family. Because every interaction with this family for the past 6 years has reinforced that my value is determined by your standards, not my own. Tonight was just the most recent example. A family intervention based on assumptions nobody bothered to verify. I pulled up another email on my phone and showed it to them. This is from the Stanford Alumni Association. They want me to speak on a panel about entrepreneurship and alternative career paths for PhD graduates. I said no because I knew, if any of you heard about it, you'd show up and make it about yourselves. Melissa's voice was small. That's not fair, isn't it? How many times have you made jokes about my little nonprofit job? How many dinners have included suggestions that I was wasting my potential? How many times has Dad offered to help me find a real career? Dad opened his mouth, then closed it again. The nonprofit work isn't a waste, I continued. It's always been the point. Make enough money to be financially independent, then use that independence to actually do work that matters. The kids I teach about marine ecosystems, the beaches we clean, the conservation research we fund. That's what I'm working for. The real estate is just the engine that makes it possible. James set down his wine glass carefully. When you said you were thinking about my offer to join my firm last year, I was being polite. I never had any intention of practicing law. I got my JD specifically to understand real estate law better. It was a tool for my actual business, not a career path. Sophie looked like she might be sick. And when I suggested you apply to teach at my school, I appreciate that you thought of me, but I make more from my properties in a month than your school pays annually. No offense, none taken, she whispered. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. I told my managing partners that you were struggling. I asked them to create a position for you. I've been planning to announce it tomorrow, on Christmas Day, as a gift. A junior analyst role with a clear path to associate. Starting salary, I asked already knowing. 75,000, plus benefits. That's very generous, Dad. It's approximately what I make in rental income every 9 days. He flinched. Mom was still crying. You let me feel sorry for you. You let me worry about your future, about you finding a husband, about you being alone. I'm not alone, Mom. I have friends, relationships, a community. You've just never asked about any of it because you were too busy pitying me. So all of this, Melissa gestured around the table, was what? A test. Some kind of game to see if we'd accept you without success. No, I said firmly. This was me protecting something precious from people who'd already proven they couldn't see value in anything that didn't match their narrow definition of achievement. I love my work, both the nonprofit side and the real estate side. I love the life I've built. I wasn't about to let this family's judgment contaminate that. The silence stretched out. Outside, I could hear Christmas carolers going door to door in the neighborhood. The turkey was getting cold on the table. Nobody was eating. Finally, Dad spoke. The riverside condo we wanted you to buy, the one we said made sense for your salary range, would have been a terrible investment. That development is built on unstable soil, with a history of foundation problems. I looked into it when you first mentioned it last month. Structural engineers I consulted said, it'll need major remediation within 5 years. You'd have been lucky to break even. He absorbed this, then asked quietly, what else have we been wrong about? Pretty much everything regarding my life for the past 7 years, I said, not unkindly. But that's not entirely your fault. I let you be wrong. I chose privacy over validation. And now? James asked. Why tell us now? Because Dad just threatened to cut me off financially, unless I abandon my entire life and move back home. And I realized that if I didn't correct the record, you'd spend the rest of Christmas thinking you were saving me from myself. I stood up, smoothing out my sweater. Thrift store find, $5, which they'd all probably noticed and judged. For what it's worth, I'm not angry. I understand why you made the assumptions you made. I'm the youngest, the one who chose an unconventional path, the one who didn't follow the family blueprint. It made sense to worry. Emma, Mom started, reaching for my hand. But I need you to understand something, I continued. I didn't build a $42 million business empire to prove you wrong. I built it because I love the work, I'm good at it, and it allows me to support the conservation work that actually matters to me. Your approval or disapproval was never the point. Dad looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine uncertainty in his eyes. What happens now? Now, I'm going to go home to my dump apartment in my deteriorating building on the beach. Tomorrow I have a conference call with my team about the Laguna acquisition. On the 27th, I'm hosting a beach cleanup for 100 local kids. New Year's Eve, I'm closing on a mixed-use property in San Clemente. I picked up my phone and checked David's latest message, and apparently I need to decide whether to accept an $8.2 million offer on my Marina del Rey complex, or counter with something higher. So I have a busy week ahead. Melissa found her voice. Can we talk? Really talk? Not like this, but later, when everyone's had time to process. I considered her for a moment. Maybe, if the conversation is about actually getting to know who I am, not about trying to insert yourselves into my business, or offering unsolicited advice about what I should do differently. Fair, she said quietly. Emma, Dad said, and his voice was different now, smaller. I owe you an apology. You owe me several, I said, but we can start with one. I'm sorry, for assuming, for not asking, for making you feel like you had to hide your success from your own family. Mom nodded through her tears. We're so sorry, sweetheart. I looked at them all, my brilliant, accomplished, completely oblivious family, and felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. Okay, I said. Apologies noted. But here's what needs to change. You need to trust that I know what I'm doing with my life. You need to ask questions instead of making assumptions, and you need to understand that success looks different for different people. My version just happens to come with a beach view. James managed a weak smile. $47 million beach view. $60 million once the current acquisitions close, I corrected. But who's counting? I headed toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Dad, that account Mom has access to, the one you've been monitoring? I'm going to close it tomorrow, open a new one at a different bank. No offense, but my financial privacy matters to me. None taken, he said quietly. That's completely reasonable. I grabbed my coat from the hall closet. Mom followed me to the door. Will you come for brunch tomorrow? She asked. Please, I promise no more interventions, no more lectures, just family. I thought about it. What time? 10? I'll be here by 11. I have a call at 9 that can't be moved. She hugged me, and I let her. I'm proud of you, Emma. I should have said that years ago. Yeah, I said. You should have. I walked out into the cool December evening, my phone already buzzing with new messages. David following up on the Marina del Rey offer, my property manager reporting a maintenance issue at one of my Carlsbad properties, my accountant with year-end tax strategy questions. The life I'd built, the empire I'd created, the work I loved, it was all waiting for me. And for the first time in years, my family finally knew it existed. Whether they'd be part of it going forward, whether we'd find a way to bridge the gap between who they thought I was and who I actually am, remained to be seen. But at least now, we were starting from a place of truth. I climbed into my car, a 7-year-old Honda that everyone always told me to replace, and smiled. It ran perfectly, cost almost nothing to maintain, and didn't attract attention in the beach neighborhoods where I did business. Sometimes the best disguise is simply letting people see what they expect to see. I started the engine and headed toward the coast, toward home, toward the life that was authentically mine.